Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. This is Daily Tottenham Transfer News Live, and I'm joined by Sonny from Sonny Talk Spurs. How are you, mate?
I'm really good. I'm excited to get into this one because we've actually made a signing that wasn't a loan signing from last year. So lots to talk about, Barnaby, I'm sure.
Well, that's absolutely right. But also, Sonny, you were just saying kind of off air that I haven't spoken to you on the channel since Bilbao, since we're champions. I mean, how has your life changed since that magical night?
I can now use the infamous phrase "wore a trophy." I can now,
I hope you
you
are
know,
using Warrior Trophy very regularly,
oh,
like
I'm
I
I'm
am.
u- I'm using that. I love like the little things, like when we mention a player at the club, you just show a picture of them holding the trophy, or yeah. And funny enough, before I joined the call, I've only watched the first 2 minutes of the documentary that they've just
Mm.
released, and I've seen the Postecoglou speech, and there is a part of my heart which was a little bit sad seeing him, because I was happy that he went, and I'm glad we got Thomas Frank. I mean, it has been so long since we last had a proper chat. So much has happened at the football
It,
club.
it has, but for any of the audience kind of wondering what the hell you're talking about, so Spurs on Spurs Play have just at 5 o'clock, so a couple of hours ago, released a documentary called Winners, which is kind of, now I've watched a bit longer than 5 minutes. I would say it's a slightly kind of forcefully put together documentary where they're giving you the impression that they were interviewing the players throughout the season, but actually I think what they've done is kind of hastily interviewed them in hindsight after they won. But it does show some really excellent bits, especially like you said, the Postecoglou kind of pre-final, Winston Churchill-esque speech talking about the players' family, and so it's definitely worth a watch. Where were you for that final? Where did you watch it, and who were you with, and all that stuff?
Well, this is a great story in itself. I'll try and keep it short. I think I did tell you this. I was on a stag do in Benidorm.
That's right. You
I
told
had
me before you were going. That's right.
Yes, I had to change my flight because I was actually flying during the game because this was organised about a year ago. Cut a long story short, I paid £100 to change my flight. Went out at least 5 to 6 hours before the whole rest of the stag party turned up. I watched it in the hotel with Spurs fans. I was really shocked because I went to the bar next door to my hotel. It was full of Manx, so I was like, can't watch it there. Went back to the hotel. They had it on like really small screen, which was like in the top corner of this bar. Then a few Spurs fans turned up and they were like, "Can we sit with you?" I was like, "Yes, please. I'm on my own." Watched the game. It was amazing. Drunk so many pints. The stag party then turned up at midnight Spanish time. We went out and I got back at 5 a.m. and the stag party was amazing, even though Benidorm is a strange place, but we had a really, really good time.
Oh, that's absolutely brilliant. And has your kind of I've found that after since we won it, basically my life has been kind of not only obviously making Spurs content, kind of reveling in it, but also especially on my TikTok channel, making content kind of at the expense of Arsenal fans and watching them be as hypocritical as they could possibly be as they suddenly talk about how trophies are not everything that matters. Actually, it's where you finish in the league that's more important, even though under the Pochettino, in the Pochettino years, they said the direct opposite.
They've become what they hate, and that's what makes it so funny. And yeah, you stole the words right out of my mouth. They've become Pochettino 2.0, and they're just even I'm seeing TikTok still pop up of that, like who had a better season. And I'm sorry, it's Spurs. It's plain and simple. All you remember is what happened in that competition. And I've still got West Ham fans being like, well, it's easier in the Europa League. We don't have teams dropping down. But when you look at the route that some teams made, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We achieved the same. We got into the Champions League. And I'm just hoping that Thomas Frank is given the tools that he needs to take this team on to the next level. And I mentioned Ange just before there in that roaring speech. I was very critical of him towards the end, but I still believe he has laid some foundation for us to build upon. And now I think Thomas Frank can get the most out of Tell, out of Odebear, Archie Gray, Bergvall to take them to the next level. And fair play to Thomas Frank. I thought his interview was fantastic, but he's now got to put, proof into the pudding.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're saying that basically in the last few months you were kind of staunchly Ange out. Was there any element of you, I'll hold my hands up to this after the win in Bilbao and in that week, including the parade, I was kind of saying I'm not sure how we can fire him. But were you a little more kind of were you head ruling heart at that point? Were you able to see kind of the right decision that you now think has been made?
I was similar to you. I was quite emotional and I was like, if they do keep him on, we'll see what happens. But then I had that nagging thought of like, I can see it getting to Christmas and we being in a tricky situation, having to sack him, I feel like we needed to get a new manager in, give him a pre-season, put his style of play. And also what's good is now Ange Postecoglou leaves as a hero.
Mm-hmm.
We will welcome him back with open arms, and he'll get a job with ease, whether it is in Saudi Arabia. I know he's been linked with jobs out there, or across Europe. I back him to now go and do whatever he can, and we will forever be grateful for this this squad. And we just now got to show that we can do it week in, week out in the Premier League and in other cup competitions, because we've had a taste of it now after 17 years. This is the second ever trophy I've seen at 28 years old, and I'm hungry for more.
Yeah, and I have to say, I'll hold my hands up again with this. When we were talking, I was talking on videos in the few weeks before the final, and all those reports, if you remember, were coming out that Ange would be sacked, whatever happened. I was talking about how kind of Thomas Frank was probably third. If they were talking about the list of Iraola, Frank, and Silva, and I was saying Frank is probably second or third on that list, because, and I think I was a little bit kind of maybe I'd seen how Brentford played against us in both games this season, where they went very direct against us. And I was like, it seems a little bit one-dimensional. But then Frank got kind of appointed, and I've done a lot of research and due diligence. And now I feel kind of pretty confident that maybe he's the right choice. What kind of journey did you go on the Frank side of things?
I'd say it was a couple of months back when I was starting to, doubt Ange Postecoglou could be our manager for the future. It was between my choices were Thomas Frank and Iraola. Iraola was sort of ahead, but as I sort of watched more of Bournemouth this season, and it will be interesting to see Bournemouth next season, considering that they're potentially losing 3 out of their back 4. He had similar injuries like we did. He was still quite gung-ho, and to me, it then felt like it was going to be more of the same. And I know Tottenham over, since Pochettino, we have chopped and changed between different managers, different styles. But I think we needed like a reset. And I feel like Thomas Frank is what I said in my video, which I promptly put out 24 hours after Ange Postecoglou had been signed, talking about how Frank sets up, what he'd be like at Tottenham. This was before he got appointed as well. I said that he'd come in, he'd be there'd be no BS, which we've had with the likes of Ange, even with Ange, which I didn't think we would. But the way he was spiking interviews, he's to the point, he's concise.
When you say BS in terms of Ange, do you think kind of basically lying to the press, to one story to the press where the truth wasn't that, or do you mean specifically just how spiky he was?
I think a bit of both. Like he became, he started off as the media darling, and then it sort of unraveled. He was a bit rude and spiky, as you say. I feel like you don't get that with Thomas Frank. What you see is what you get. You can tell he used to be a teacher, in a previous career. And the way he sat down, as I mentioned in that interview, he is just, he said it's going to be tricky, but there's sort of, he won't throw the players under the bus. He won't throw Levy under the bus, which he'll be happy about. Maybe we won't as fans. And he won't have a go at the fans. I think he is quite a peacemaker. He's very he's quite politician-like the way he speaks. So I just feel like after watching, that sort of stuff, and even, we're quite grateful that he's done so many, he's done Monday Night Football. They did a behind-the-scenes documentary with a lot of his coaching staff who have come, to Spurs. And I just love the way how he manages. Each game is its own entity. Each, game, he's thinking, right, I'm 2-0 down. 20 minutes have just gone. How do I change this? Whereas Ange, it was the same thing, flogging the dead horse. And you just can't be like in the Premier League. And, Frank's got a really good record against the big six. But, maybe, there was moments where you go, well, this is a Brentford team at the end of the day who have been performing miracles. It'd be interesting to see how they perform with Keith Andrews at the helm now. But I just feel like Thomas Frank was due this move. I feel like this is a good level of a step up for him, instead of maybe like a Man United or, a Liverpool, maybe that would be too big.
Smaller clubs, you mean?
That is true. But I feel like, the attention will be less on him than it would be at Manchester United. I just feel like the time is right, and I'm just quite confident that, I'm not going to sit here and say we're going to finish top 4, but I feel like if we finish at least like 8th, Spurs are going to have to take that for one seat. Take that for one seat. We finished 17th last year, but it is going to be tricky because he is going to try and have to implement new things, get better at set pieces. He's probably going to look for if is someone in the squad good at throw-ins. Like because how he sort of sees the game. So I'm just intrigued to see what happens. I feel like it's going to be a good adventure.
Do you have any fears that some of the players, kind of as I've been talking about a little bit more, like the egos within the squad, those players who are on big money, might find it easy to say, what have you ever done? What have you ever won? If things get a little bit tricky?
I mean, I feel like it depends who those players are, because I feel like there are certain areas where we do need a bit of an overhaul, but I feel like these youngsters will want to, come with Ange on this journey and see where it takes them.
Thomas Frank, you accidentally said Ange.
Oh yes, Thomas Frank. Sorry, it's because I saw someone say Ange in the comments next to me. But I feel like with Thomas Frank, all you got to do is look at what he did at Brentford. I was hinting it in my previous answer. He is just. Some of the players he's improved there, even like last season, like Keane Lewis Potter, who would have thought he'd, make him into a very, good attacking left back, getting 40 goals out of Mbuemo and Visser Joint, Ollie Watkins, Ben Rama, Tony. I feel like, a player like Dominic Solanke will be licking his lips, because I feel like Solanke is a mixture of a lot of those strikers I've just mentioned there. Like, he could be whatever player he wants to be. Brendan Johnson could be his Mbuemo, because he'll just say, I know you're good at goals. I'm going to get you in that area all the time to score them. You don't have to dribble a winger. We will make sure these chances are on a plate. There's still a lot to sort out. I think midfield is really big this summer for Spurs. And I feel like we've got a lot of bloat in that area where we could get rid of a few. But I always say this, I still think, even in the modern game, no player is bigger than the club. If a Christian Romero, for example, wants to go to Atletico Madrid, good luck to him. You've been a good servant. You helped us win that trophy.
Yeah.
Fair play to him. But I feel like it's hard to know who the egos are at that in the side. Maybe, I don't know, who would you say is
I think
obviously
Romero comes out. I was definitely pleased to see the way that James Maddison reacted to Frank in that behind the scenes tour. He kind of seemed very approachable. I would say possibly, I think Dejan Kulusevski is obviously a great bloke, but I feel like he's such a winner, and he's getting to probably the mid-20s now, where he's probably like, I don't have time to muck around. And so he does strike me as the kind of player who might, give someone a chance like Thomas Frank. But if he feels like he's not quite got it, then maybe he would react to that. But it's all, it's all very hypothetical. One thing, just to bring it round to transfers, because obviously everybody wants to talk about transfers in summer as well. We have just lost out on Rooney Bargi, who's going to Barcelona, who's another young, exciting talent. I wondered if I saw some people on social media saying, oh, here's an example of what we've lost out on now that Ange has gone, because Ange was so good at those kind of phone calls and persuading players to come to us instead of other clubs. Do you think that's something we're going to have to worry about, or is that overplayed?
I think it's overplayed. It's always hindsight. Like we've had elite managers, elite, if you still count Conte and Mourinho when they came to us as that, who, we couldn't get Bastoni through the door. We went for Longley. So, William was doing his medical and then he ended up at Chelsea. Like, I feel like it is hypothetical. At the end of the day, it was different maybe for Lucas Bergwall, because Barcelona were more up in the air at that stage. People didn't know how they were going to fare financially. Even last season, there were stages where they didn't know whether they could keep Dani Olmo, and maybe they would have to release him. But now, if someone offers you Tottenham or Barcelona, you are going to go to Barcelona. You get to play with Lamine Yamal. You play an exciting brand of football under Hansi Flick. You're more likely to probably compete for a league title.
That's if you can get in the team, though. What Tottenham have proven is that they're a place now, kind of like, as I've talked about them for the last kind of year, 18 months like this, and I feel like this is what the transfer strategy is, kind of trying to make us almost like the English Borussia Dortmund. Do you know what I mean? Teams who, they're going to sign or try and sign the best young talent, any of the best young talent that Chelsea don't hoover up first, and then actually give them opportunities. That's kind of where I see us at.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that we're, in these conversations for players like that. But I mean, I've seen a lot of conversation at the moment about certain players that we're looking to sign, and does it sort of interfere with the growth of the current crop that we've got currently in the side? You look at all the young wingers we've got, young defenders that we now have. I mean, the fact that we've, brought down the average age of this side is really impressive. Yeah. But I guess what we also want is, and a lot of Spurs players, I see it in my comment section on my channel, a bit more experience as well to sort of dovetail that. And, I mean, Thomas Frank's got an amazing track record of improving youngsters as well. So that's probably when we're missing out on a player like Rooney Bargi. It's like, oh, what could have been? But we'll have to see. You know, I feel like we have been quite lucky in the youth market at the moment, and hopefully, you know, the defender we signed yesterday is another one who will be like that.
Yeah, I'm going to get on to him. I just want to go back to what one of these comments is. This might be the one you said you saw with Ange. Said, yes, Sonny, you've been buzzing for Ange being sacked, clearly. I know that we finished 17th and that's bad, but he clearly stated Europa League only. I just want to ask you, and thanks, Vez, for your comment. I want to ask you, Sonny, whether you actually believe Big Ange Postecoglou when he said, oh, we made that decision basically back in January. Now, for me, and I don't want to be seen to be slagging Ange off because he did an amazing job. And like you said, he'll forever be a legend. But for me, I think there's been a little bit of kind of retrofitting that. Now, what I would say is that I think Ange Postecoglou did make the decision at the right time to say, I'm basically only going to play Van der Ven and Romero in the knockout stages. And if that's what he means by it, then I would agree with him. But he didn't say that. He came out and said, oh, we basically... I mean, what he alluded to is the idea of throwing the Premier League, and I don't think that's the case. I wonder where you were on that.
I mean, the thing is, hindsight is amazing, and I did see a lot of different Tottenham fans sort of, you know, after we did win it, and when there was rumours of him sacking in that week where he eventually did get sacked on the Friday, being like, oh, no, we've got to keep him now. After there was a lot of people saying like, no, he has to go. He has to go. And the problem I had was, and in response to, I've been buzzing. I weren't buzzing. I just, after that Everton game, that's what it was for me. I just thought, I don't see Ange as the long-term Spurs manager. I don't see him being able to build on, especially this trophy win. I can't see how, you know, and we've said this about, and maybe this is the same for Thomas Frank at Brentford. Thomas Frank's looked at it and gone, I can't take this Spurs side, this Brentford side any further. So I'm going to move to another side. And I still think that with Ange at Spurs, I don't think he would be able to now, you know, really go off the back of this and, you know, win more. I feel like he would always have it against him. He'd need like a 40-man squad that he'd have to rotate, you know, all the time. The injuries would increase. I feel like people forget that. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I love that we won the trophy. You know, I'm buzzing and so excited that we did it. And I feel like we can still go on to do bigger and better things this season. But I can't hide the fact that we lost 22 games last season. And some of the games that we lost, we shouldn't have been losing. And especially at home, we want to make the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium a fortress. And in its first couple of years, it's been, you know, anything but that. We've lost to some really poor teams, especially, you know, I was there for Leicester, I was there for Ipswich. But in regard to the question about him saying that, I just feel like, yeah, it's hindsight. He would say that. I feel like it was obvious he was always going to rest the two defenders, Van der Ven and Romero, but there were still games where he was playing, you know, he was still playing Kulusevski when he was injured, and that's probably why he got injured again. You know, Son was knackered.
Funny as well,
you know, there was still, you know, Solanke was playing silly minutes. You know, Arsenal fans moaned at Arteta for doing that with Saka, but we were having instances of that. And also, like, you know, if he was so adamant like that, he then put all the eggs in the Europa League basket from January. We weren't really guaranteed it there, but there was a stage where we were in the semi-final against Liverpool, 1-0 up, and we didn't go further. You know, there was an instant there where he didn't show that. I just said it to my mate of he sent the Ange video to me of this speech, and he was like, you know, what does this make you feel? And I said, did he say that same speech before every one of those 22 losses? I don't think so. You know, when all these players sticking by Ange, but I didn't see all that fight throughout the whole of last season. And
yeah, that's what Harry Redknapp said, isn't it? If you saw that Harry Redknapp interview where he was just like, you know, how do you feel about all these, you know, Ange getting sacked and all these players coming out supporting him? And he just went, yeah, well, they should, if they wanted to support him, they should have worked a bit harder in the league, shouldn't they? And it is as simple as that, really.
I mean, and I hate this argument of everyone who goes like, in a different season, Spurs would be relegated. No, those three teams, and also those three teams came up from the Championship, and that's how the league works. Like, you know, if those three teams didn't exist, well, they did. And there's a big chance that it happens again this season. I fancy Leeds to maybe stay up, but I could see Sunderland and Burnley struggling. So maybe that's two of the three. Brentford, Bournemouth, you know, with, you know, a lot of players being lost. So, you know, a team as big as Spurs should still not be, with that squad, 17th in the Premier League, even though I've said we had a better season than Arsenal. But we just got to get consistent across, you know, all different facets
and listen,
the campaign.
I think we will. I have a feeling. I've kind of like Pochettino vibes about Thomas Frank, and
yeah,
as long as he's given the time, I think people have to remember with Pochettino, his first season was a bit up and down, and he had to kind of get rid of some of the senior players and bring in the younger players, and there might be a little element of that. But if we give him the time, I have these kind of Pochettino vibes. Let's move this on to then some of the transfer stuff. And of course, yesterday Kota Takai was confirmed. Dai has written in. Thank you, Dai, for your question. Says, not sure what everyone's issue is with the new Japanese kid. Isn't it the whole point of getting Thomas Frank in? By bargain bin players and polish them up to sell a profit. Well, this is what came out with the announcement of Takai, that he was identified by Johan Langer and his staff as being able to step straight into the Premier League, following in the footsteps of other young signings at the club in recent years, such as Lucas Bergwall, Pat Matsar, and Destiny Udogie, with the signing also being given the green light by Frank. Now, my instinct is not to say or not to agree that it's about buying bargain bin players and polishing them up. What I would say is, and regular viewers will have heard me say many times, I actually am fully in agreement with the transfer strategy to buy exciting young talent, all of a kind of similar age group who can grow together. Kind of like I was just saying, basically trying to recreate what happened with when Pochettino came in. Because people seem to forget, I think, that when Pochettino came in, just as examples, nobody really rated Danny Rose before that. Nobody really rated Kyle Walker before that. We had Jan Vertonghen, who was great, but he'd had a bit of a dodgy season. And Moussa Dembele, even as an example, was never quite played in that position. But Pochettino was the one who, in Dai's words, really polished those players, and they became a team at the same time. And I think we have the nucleus of a team already in a similar way, where if Frank can get the best out of them and improve them in a similar way to how Pochettino did, then it's not about then selling them on for a profit necessarily. It's about then really pushing up the league and becoming challengers. And I feel like you and I probably feel relatively similarly on that front.
Yeah, I mean, I got a lot of heat for my video yesterday because I didn't know who he was. I'm not going to be around the bush. I did not know who Takai was. But now, after a day of research, and Talksport on the Hawksby and Jacob show had a Japanese football expert, and they were talking about him. And
what did he say?
He sort of said just like, this is a guy who is one of the better players from that league. He was always going to go on to bigger and better. He's big, physical, 6'3", loves a diagonal pass. I've watched a few of his compilations. I've actually seen the compilation because his side beat Ronaldo in the Asian Cup final, I believe.
And he had a great game.
And he had a great game. And there's a few times he's tackling Ronaldo. He's comfortable on the ball. He's willing to drive with it. I think it's a clever little signing. If it works out, it's good. I mean, I've seen some people say, is this Levy trying to now secure the Japanese market, which you just don't know these things. I think he came from the same league, the same team as Kaoru Matoma.
Yeah, he did, yeah.
So, there's always... The thing is with Spurs fans, I do find it funny. 1 minute we go like, we point at players and go like, why didn't we sign a player like that? Why didn't we go, why didn't we sign Jared Bowen from Hull? Why didn't we sign, X, Y, and Z? But then when we bid 40 million for Archie Gray, everyone's like, oh, hang on a minute. Oh, I'm not sure about this. It's the same with this. Like, we've plucked him out of nowhere. He's cost 5 million, which is literally nothing. We've got to think as well. Everyone's like, oh, what's going to happen to Vuskovic? What's going to happen to Ashley Phillips? Frank might play a three at the back. Frank might, want to mix it up. We're in so many competitions. We've seen the injury record of Romero and Van der Ven, so there's always that chance of it happening. I still think if Romero leaves, we'll still buy another senior centre-back. I'm quite confident of that. This guy isn't going to play, Takai's not going to play 38 Premier League games. I can't see that happening. But, the fact that they're putting so much faith into this signing, and he's going to, because funny enough, in that list you said there, Udogie and Sarr went back to their clubs on loan for a season.
Yes, so that's right.
The fact that he's coming back in, he's coming straight in the side, shows a lot of confidence. And you never know, you might do a pre-season and they might go, actually, we think you should have a loan. Thomas Frank will want to see all his assets laid out of him on the table and go, right, who's going to, it's all up for grabs here. And I actually think I think one of the best rebuilds that we've done so far at the club is rebuilding that defence, because it's the youngest, but you've got to look at the calibre of players we've now got. Udogie, Spence, Porro, Romero, Van der Ven, Vuskovic, Danza. I think we've got such a nice blend of different styles, different players. And I'm really, and even like I've seen some people say like, well, I'm happy now because it means we get rid of Dragusin. I'm even confident when Dragusin comes back from his injury under Thomas Frank, he's going to be used how he should be. You know, he wasn't an Ange signing, so I'm very shocked we made it when we did. But I'm confident, you know, we dropped this line a bit deeper and we're, you know, more proactive instead of reactive in defence. You know, a lot of these players can come good. So hopefully, you know, I've got confidence that we are, you know, we're gonna hopefully, you know, I think we should operate like a Brentford or a Brighton, you know, plucking young talent out of different leagues from around the world because, you know, we're one of the only teams that don't do it. And also we've actually got a better record when we pay, you know, 5 million for a Dele Alli, 11 million for an Ericsson instead of 65 million for a Tanguy and Ndombele, and it ends up flopping.
So Jackie Boy Johnson here said, thanks for your comments. Says, are we setting up a school with all these kids we're signing? And Daniel Levy's accountant says, why can't we sign established players who are in their prime? Ali Gold actually came out today and said that one of the reasons behind these signings, and obviously having Vuskovic coming back as well, is that, and Ali Gold actually said the plan is to keep them within the first team until January because Tottenham are like hyper aware of the injury issues they got themselves in last season. And like you said, Archie Gray then having to play at centre-back out of position, Ben Davies having to play there for far too many games. So it strikes me a little bit of kind of dangerous, what I like to call dangerous common sense. And obviously, you know, people like Jackie Boy Johnson and Daniel Levy's accountant, I understand the sentiment, but I think the reality is they want to absolutely cover themselves against that kind of injury crisis in one position again, especially when it's going to be a tougher ask in the Champions League. And then also be able to, like you said, to have Thomas Frank looking at these players. And then I would also add to this, especially with this comment, why can't we sign established players who are in their prime? I think the reality of how June is compared to July and the financial year, I think we're seeing that the majority of clubs are waiting till July to start to pull the trigger on the kind of bigger signings they want to do. It's only really Liverpool and Man City who are any different. And obviously they, you know, for different reasons, they have the ability to spend money in a way that a lot of the other clubs don't. Is that kind of how you feel about it as well?
Yeah, I'm not worried. You know, Tottenham never do their business early. And you say their City did theirs early for the Club World Cup. Liverpool, what we got to remember about them is they didn't do any business last year. So they're now going double for it. You know, they've shipped Kwanzaa out. So that's what helps them with PSR. I'm quite, you know, happy at the moment because the deals that I am seeing, and you know, I'm intrigued to what people count as first team quality because I did a video today on my channel about Eze, and I've got 50% comments being like, love this, really want this. I've got 50% of comments being like, well, how's he going to get in over Maddison? How's he going to get in over Kulusevski?
Yeah, I've seen comments like that. Yeah,
and I'm like, what about depth? What about, you know, his versatility? And then what we got to think is, and this is not me defending Daniel Levy, this is just me knowing the situation. We're not going to sign a Brian and Mbeumo if he's being offered 250k a week at Manchester United. You know, Manchester United, they can sack all the dinner ladies they want, you know, and say they're cutting costs for, you know, lunches and all that sort of stuff, but they still cough up wages like that. Until we change our wage structure, we're not going to attract the best players. That's just what's going to happen. We've got to sort of, you know, be a bit more clever with the signings we do. And, you know, Takai is probably not going to be on that much money. He's probably, I don't know what he would be on, maybe like 20 to 50k. And like the 50k is being very generous. Yeah. So, you know, I just think because every first team player, I'm like, but these sort of the people who say that are like, well, where are the opportunities going to be for Mikey Moore? Where are the opportunities going to be for Odebear? You know, we've just signed Tell as well. Like, how do we fit all these players in? And I actually think a lot of these teams are now, you know, a lot of these players have now become senior and first team quality. Look how Bergval's matured as the season went on. I know he was sort of chucked in at the deep end, but these are players who have the weight on their shoulders. They've won a trophy now, so they're even more, you know, they're winners, which is something that we've not been able to say about a lot of great Tottenham players who've come through, you know, in the last 20 odd years. So I think we've just got to play it out, see what happens, you know, and there's still a lot to do. As I say, I think we need, you know, a 6. I still think that needs to happen. Eze, I feel like that could happen. I feel I'm really confident that that will happen. I feel like they will want to make an X factor, you know, signing to sort of show like there is a stage of intent, and that's how Daniel Levy can try and win over the Spurs fan base. And there's areas, maybe another fullback. So it's sort of why like we've been linked with Kyle Walker-Peters and Dennis Shirkin, because it's logical. We also need to comply with the homegrown club train sort of things for UEFA competition. So there's a lot of things to sort out. And what people aren't sort of thinking of is who's going to leave. Is Richarlison going to leave? Basuma? Is Bentancur being given this new deal that's been rumoured? There's a lot of outgoings before incomings as well. So I think we just got to wait out. It's so early. I mean, the Club World Cup's still going on. Like, it has the last season technically ended yet? Probably not. So wait it out. It's literally so early.
That's right. And as Sukil says in this comment, thank you, Sukil, for your comment. Appreciate that. Says, Eza, the young Argentine winger, Norgard, obviously the captain of Brentford, Rodrigo Muniz from Fulham, and Coney de Winter. So there's some of the players being linked with. This news on the Argentinian boy. Spurs considering a move for Argentinian wonderkid Ian Subiabra. No idea if that's how to pronounce that. 18-year-old winger, exciting prospect from River Plate. He scored 1 goal in 12 appearances and apparently has a £23 million release clause, although I doubt they would look to pay that realistically. Chelsea have previously been interested. Now, I'm a little burnt by our buying youth from Argentina with our other big number 9. So how do you feel about going there? Is that seems like maybe a bit too much of a risk for me.
Yeah, it seems like signing players from Argentina is now the new, it used to be Brazil, but I feel like a lot of people have been a bit, I feel like the last good Brazilian to come out of Brazil was probably Vinicius Junior. A lot of people have sort of, there was that one, was it Marquinhos at Arsenal? He never really came good. I think he actually got rid of him this summer. But yeah, I mean, I was speaking to someone about the Lee signing earlier and sort of said like, someone went to me.
I mean, he's struggled on loan, Valise, hasn't he? Wherever he's gone as well in Spain.
Yeah, I just feel like how long's a piece of string with some of these signings? It's just sort of what I was saying about Takai there. We won't know until we sign them and we see them play. And are they guaranteed starters? It always feels like with me, sometimes you do pull out. We seem to sign better when we've like I said, Dele Alli there, like when they're sort of homegrown and from England. When we sort of do go further afield to South America and pluck straight from there, it never really works out. But I don't know if that's the structure of the club. I mean, a lot of people also argue, like, what about our academy? What about, Jamie Donnelly's and Alfie Dorrington's? Like, what's their pathway? But I think a lot of people need to understand that, youth players are not, you're not going to get 11 youth players in the team. It's usually the strongest will survive. So it's hard to say. And then looking at the rest of that list, I mean, Norgard, 31 years old. I was
going to ask you about Norgard. So yeah, 31 years old, obviously the captain of Brentford. We've talked about Spurs looking for a 6. My issue with that, and I'm interested to hear yours, is, is he realistically at a club like Spurs going to be that much better than, say, Pierre-Emile Højbjerg, who, by the way, Thomas Frank has worked with before, and although he's gone to Marseille on loan, it is an obligation, so we won't see him again. I just fear for some of those types of players when they come into Spurs that the fan base don't give them that much time. I don't even really feel like we gave even Perisic that much time, and certainly not Matt Doherty. So I don't know. I feel like Norgard, it seems like an obvious good idea as a signing, but I wonder whether it wouldn't quite work. What do you think?
I feel like any Brentford player being linked is a bit of lazy journalism. I've seen Visser, I've seen Collins, I've seen Mbuemo obviously as well. So I mean, I wouldn't say no. I mean, maybe we do need like one of Frank's men to come in and sort of be like, right, this is the situation. But then you're hoping, could Basuma do that? Could, Bentancur be that 6?
Yeah.
Or could we go out and sign someone?
If they're playing, or if he's going to play a double pivot, there'll be a lot more protection in front of the back 4. And can Thomas Frank, basically in my eyes, can Thomas Frank get into Basuma, say, I need you to concentrate for 90 minutes in every game the way you did in that kind of semi-final and final of the Europa League? You've shown you can do it. Now you have to show you can do it every single game. And if Frank doesn't get the impression that Basuma can do that, then bomb him out, get 25 million for him, and bring in a young Dane like Zabuzi is saying in this comment, or even Norgard. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like, to me, I feel like it's lazy journalism and it's just been put out there. And, we're saying we want leaders, we want experience. And then, we get linked with a 31-year-old. Everyone goes, oh, it's too old. But even I think in the rumour, I think Arsenal looked like they were keen, and even he won't play every game. They'll rotate I think the thing is we need to realise with Frank is it is probably going to be a lot of experimenting, seeing what works, and you never know. Like he was able to get amazing output out of Janelt and Norgard and all those different sort of Jensen,
Schade, Visser, everyone.
Exactly. So I could see him. He might turn a surprise candidate in this squad into the next best thing, and we won't even know it's coming.
Yeah, and exactly what I agree with you with what you said about Radu Dragusin. I think he could be a player who surprises us. Obviously, we've got to see him through his recovery because I don't think he'll probably be available till maybe Christmas time. PKD81 has said, Eza single-handedly won Palace their first ever trophy. He's a colossal player who'll bring us several match-winning moments in the league and Europe. We haven't had a player like that since Kane. You've alluded to the idea that you think maybe this is one that could happen. I get a similar feeling on the basis that sometimes when all of the kind of different journalists start writing a similar kind of story, it feels like it's going the right way. You talked a little bit about how some people had reacted to a video of yours, saying, where's he going to fit in with Maddison and Kulusevski? But for me, the main part of that is, not only what you said in terms of depth, but also, we need players to come in who can push those players. There shouldn't be anyone really
100%.
whose name is guaranteed to start every game. And that is exactly what Eza would do across maybe 3 or 4 different positions. Because if he's not going to play in the 10, he can play wide left or wide right. And I even could see him in a kind of 8 role as well, if needed, because he's very happy picking the ball up off the back 4. So for me, it's an absolute no-brainer. If we can get him at a price we're happy at. And I can't now, I think in my video yesterday, I was going through the clubs who've been linked with him. And I can't see City going for him now because they got the French kid in who's started really well for them. I've been saying I wanted him to come to Spurs for ages. Yeah, Shirky. And then Liverpool have just got Wirtz in. So I think Spurs, I do think it might happen. And I think for me, he's just a Spurs player. He looks like a Spurs player to me.
I think I said it in my video today. The stars are aligning for this move because you got to think as well. Perfect age, he's heading into his peak years and prime. Potentially only has one more move left in him. So would he like to get Champions League football? There's no guarantee that Palace could win the Europa League, but you never know. English just really helps us when it comes to that, and he's linked up with the likes of Solanke at national level, and just I think his versatility is fantastic. Started off the season, not amazingly, but Palace didn't.
No.
But in that FA Cup final, in the game against us where he scored 2, he just sort of floats. I think your argument, I saw it actually on your live stream yesterday, the argument of him playing as an 8, I think is really good. And he can push, we got to remember how Kulusevski fell off as the season went on, how Maddison can run hot and cold. These players need to be put under a little bit of pressure and sort of show that, no one's untouchable. And, I think a perfect example would be of how Frank improved Mikkel Damsgaard at Brentford. And if you could be Frank's 10, I think you've got, the world's your oyster. You're creating, you're, dribbling past players, you're scoring. And I just think it makes sense. And I think there is a £68 million release clause for Champions League sides. I feel like that's a more viable option than maybe Mbeumo. I think you're looking upwards of 70 for him. And then you've got the wages on top of that, he obviously wants 250k, whereas I think Eze would be a more reasonable deal. And I think, it sounds silly as an argument, but I agree with you. He does feel very Spurs. We were linked with him last year. We were linked with him when he was at QPR as well. So It's always one of those ones where you think, it's bound to happen. I think the only thing that would stand in the way is depending what Palace do in general, because they love selling one high-profile asset a year. Does it depend on Gahey? But Gahey might run his contract down. So, I think we've got to get in there quick if we really want him. But I just
I think that's also a reason why, as Spurs fans, we probably need to be patient because it won't be up to us. I don't think. I think it'll be, unless we maybe do hit that release clause straight away. I think it will be up to Palace as to make some decisions on that front. Gary says here, everyone needs to calm down and wait till July. Then players will start moving on after Frank has made his mind up over who he wants to keep and let go. I do think that's another really good point. And thank you, Gary. Thomas Frank has obviously watched videos of these players and he's seen them play against his Brentford team, but he hasn't seen them in training. He hasn't seen them in the flesh. He hasn't seen how motivated they are, what their kind of thoughts are to do with do they want to go again at Spurs? Son Heung-min is a perfect example. Thomas Frank won't know until he comes back in and has that conversation. How Sonny genuinely feels about, does he want to stay and play in the Champions League one more season and run his contract down, or does he want to have a big move and realistically try and get a big contract while he's still 32 rather than 33 and that kind of stuff. So I think Gary's made a really good point there, and we're maybe going to have to be a bit more patient on signings than a lot of fans want to be.
I think, and Son's the perfect example here. I mean, there's rumours saying that we're keeping him on until we've done this tour of Asia. So
that's probably true. That's probably true.
That's how patient you've got to be. I just feel like because of how modern journalism is and Twitter, and we're expecting things to be going, but it's not. These deals can be going on for weeks and weeks and weeks. It was like as soon as Mbuemo was linked with Man United, everyone was like, that one's done. But no, like they still haven't agreed a fee, personal terms, medical, like it's a long stage before these transfers are done. It's not, Rome wasn't built in a day. And, I said it earlier, we've got to get rid of some players. We've got to bring some other, it's very, what happened last night is a rarity that like an unknown source in Japan tweets it. Next thing, Fabrizio Romano confirms it. So yeah. It's I feel like Spurs fans, and I'm probably one of them. We're not a patient bunch.
We're not. No, we're not. And sorry, just to say, I mean, I think Johan Lange does like to swim in those kind of silent waters. Like he likes those kind of bombers that come out of nowhere. That's kind of his style. So maybe we need to take quite a few of the leaks we hear with a bit of a pinch of salt. But because you mentioned Mbuemo and there've been a few comments mentioning him, I wonder whether, maybe I'm being a bit cynical here, but I wonder whether as part of all the talks with Brentford, whether Brentford said to Spurs, would you mind would you mind if we said you put a bid in for Mbuemo just to kind of hike the price up for Man United? Because it seems to me that he does actually want to join Man United, and Brentford know that, at which point they're kind of a bit screwed in terms of trying to get more money out of United, and maybe a little, cheeky, not exactly truthful bid from Spurs has helped them out.
Yeah, I wouldn't surprise if these things happen all the time. It's like PR, isn't it? I feel like that's what happened in January with us bidding for Gahey. I think it was just Daniel Levy showing like, I'm trying to sign someone, but I couldn't. But it was not going to be attainable. I just think with Mbuemo as well, it's like, so he's clearly a right winger, but then does that stop Brennan Johnson? And I feel like, we forked out a lot of money for Brennan Johnson. He had a good season last year. He scored a lot of goals, top goal scorer at the club. Scorer in the final, if you want to count it, and it weren't Luke Shaw. But I feel like we can still get the most out of him. We don't necessarily have to go out and just splash 60 million on 5 players. We can, start, get your own house in order before, you go out there and try and improve. And I even Tell, like people were like, oh no, Tell won't sign because he was an Ange signing. But it's like, if we got the price down, which we did, and I feel like 30 million for I know, take the loan fee out, but 30 million for a high profile youngster, he's still high profile last year, coming in 19 years old, showed a lot of maturity as well in moments where he was talking to the fans, calming them down, won the trophy as well. Like, I'd like to see him given a chance on the left instead, and see.
He's looking amazing in that under-21 tournament. He's showing Perfect. If you get him in the right positions, he's a brilliant finisher.
So I just feel like there's just small areas we need to tweak, and then maybe next season we'll see. I don't think we're getting left in the dust. I feel like there's a bit of a narrative developing. I'd be more worried in the transfer window if I was Arsenal, because their issues are like glaringly obvious. They need a striker desperately, but they really are indecisive about what to do. Whereas I think we've slowly been like signing some good players over the last couple of years.
Agreed.
We just need to find a couple of final bits of the jigsaw puzzle. But when I say that, I'm not saying we're going to win the league or we're guaranteed top 4. I'm sort of saying we need to do this to then, sort of get to that consistent level. Like, I just feel like, to me, it's a 6. I feel like that is one of the key areas. And the problem is, I'm not even sure who that player is. I did a video on my channel saying, like, why don't we look at Angelo Stiller at Stuttgart? He's a good age, probably would be a higher price, but he's one of those players where it's like, it's worth the risk. He's got a nice release clause, I think 40 million euros. Like, why not give it a go? Like in a double pivot, I think he could be electric. Yeah. But I'm not a scout at the club, so
Well,
I mean,
as Zabu says, sorry to interrupt, but as Zabu says in this comment, the best part about Spurs getting more centre backs is that Archie Gray will be used more in the midfield, and obviously Brentford basically got gazumped by Spurs when Tottenham bought Archie Gray. They wanted him, so presumably Thomas Frank is a fan. So it could be that Thomas Frank kind of gets into Archie Gray's head early on in pre-season, says you're going to be a really important part of my midfield this season as midfield options, and we might see. I mean, it was pretty clear to me that at his age, he wasn't suited to being basically a single man in midfield getting overrun by everybody else. But alongside someone like Bentancur, it could work out much better for him, I think.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as I saw Frank come in, I thought, like, I can imagine, like, there must be, each one of those players must be thinking, wow, like, I've got the chance here, because Pedro Porro, if we play a back three, would be fantastic. The centre backs all get a chance if we play a back three as well. The double pivot is just, it's my favourite formation, I feel, because it sort of does everything it says on the tin. The wingers are more suited to it. I feel like there was a lot of players, and this was no fault of Ange, but a lot of players didn't suit his style. I think Son didn't suit his style. Son wants to cut in and, curl it top corner or dribble at players. He doesn't want to be held wide. I feel like our fullbacks are more suited to this. They'll be going back to doing overlaps. As I said, Brennan Johnson could be like a Buemo, just playing in that inside right, because that's what he is. He's not a winger. He's like a right forward or a right striker, whatever you want to call it. So I said Solanke could be whatever striker Frank wants him to be. Play it long, he'll knock it down. Playing behind, all that sort of stuff. I just feel like there's a lot of good players, and it's just that midfield area that I hone in on, because I think there's a lot of eights. There's a lot of, I could imagine Bergwall playing there. I could imagine Gray, Bentancur, Basuma. But then I feel like when you play them both together, I feel like you need someone a bit more who's going to be like sitting, distributing, breaking lines, that sort of thing. Whereas that other one, like I could imagine Bergwall can be a great attacker, or even Bentancur. I feel like he was better in the Europa League run when he was pushing a bit further on. But we had that issue last year, didn't we? Like, we all wanted that lone six, and we knew we had too many eights. We wanted a six since probably Dembele left. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist. And we remember how good that was, Dembele with Wanyama. You always have one who's willing to be a bit more like, conservative, and then someone who's willing to push on.
Even before Wanyama came, Dyer was playing in that role and often splitting back in between the two centre halves when we were building up. Before I let you go, mate, I really appreciate you coming on the show. Gino Lars says, Levy nowhere to hide. We'll all know at the end of this window if he meant what he said or if it was total BS. Just want to ask you about that, Vinay and Daniel Levy kind of interview, and Daniel Levy saying that about wanting to win the Premier League and the Champions League. For me, I have to say, until I saw kind of a lot of people on social media being like, oh, he's going to have to put his money where his mouth is. I thought it was like him doing kind of like a passing comment, trying to show how much it means to him and his commitment to the club. And I'm kind of surprised in hindsight that they allowed that to stay in, because it has allowed it to kind of make a bit of a rod for his own back. I personally don't think it's going to suddenly mean we're going to be spending, £500 million or probably even £300 million. But I wanted to ask what you thought about all of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably the best interview that Levy's ever done, but at the same time, I'm not his biggest fan.
It's a low bar.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I'm not his biggest fan, and I won't have the wool pulled over my eyes. It's all well and good him saying like, I'm a fan and all that sort of stuff. And even I've seen it used as like him saying we want to win. The thing is, we'll say it, fans, like we all want to sit. I'll sit here now and say I want to win the Premier League and the Champions League, but I don't know, when that would, or if or when that would happen. And now that's being used as a joke, because when we're linked with Dennis Shirkin, I'm seeing quote tweets of just that in brackets, like or like when we signed,
or Kyle Walker-Peters coming in, or the
exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Hakai.
Yeah, it's the thing is, whatever Daniel Levy says, you'll have half of a group saying yes, that's fair play. You have half a group saying, what is he waffling on about? I think Vinay Venkateshan came across quite well. I feel, and a lot of what Thomas Frank was saying, like, he mentioned them all as a group. He was like Daniel, Vinay, Johan. It's very interesting, how the way he was speaking as well. So, yeah, it's hard to speculate. We need to see, when it's deadline day and we see what we've done, then we'll go from there. And another thing we haven't mentioned is Fabio Paratici coming back. It could all change if that happens. I think that happens on the 1st of July.
No, there was a report from Ali Gold, I think it was, or maybe it was one of the journals anyway, saying that his consultancy contract with Spurs runs to the end of July. So I think his FIFA ban is till the beginning of July, but then he's contracted, so we might not have to make that decision till further on. I wonder if a lot of that will kind of live and die based on how Johan Langer and Thomas Frank's kind of early months together go. I mean, they've worked together before, so you'd think it'll go well.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Thomas Frank is, I sound like a broken record. He's happy to work with what he's got. He likes, even that's been turned into a meme. I saw one today being like, Thomas Frank is really impressed with Ange Postecoglou and is looking forward to working with him. And it's like, that's being used as, it's just always being used as like a, I even saw like there was a rumor saying he might welcome Sergio Reguilon back, even though we've released him, which sound like a load of waffles. So I think, Frank, I'm trusting him now. It's going to probably come back and bite me in the bum in 2 years' time when I want him out. But I just feel like I'm just quite optimistic. I'm excited. I want to see what this side has to offer. And it's hard to judge because I just feel like it got a bit turgid under Ange, and I feel like Frank needs to reset this side. And whatever resetting means in your eyes is what it is. But to me, if we finish, even next season, if we finish 10th, that's good enough for me because I just feel like we need to, just reset, get back to basics, defending. We can score goals, we know that, but we need to start defending and start being pragmatic in games because it got a bit silly.
Well, I'm going to be a bit more positive and say that I think we're going to push towards challenging for those top 5 places. That's what I think. I think it might. I don't think necessarily it'll be the best start. I think it's going to take some patience, and I think it'll take a bit of time because, as we know, Frank likes to tinker and change formations based on who we're playing against. So it's going to take time for the players to learn each different formation. But I think eventually, as long as we give him the time, we will push towards it. Listen, Sonny, thanks so much for being on the show. Let the audience know where they can come and subscribe to your YouTube channel.
Yeah, thanks again, Barnaby. We always have a good chat when it comes to Tottenham, especially transfers. But yeah, Sonny Talks Spurs on YouTube. I had a video going up today talking about Eze, why I think, it makes perfect sense why we should sign him. I did a video yesterday reacting to Takai as well. So go and check that all out. And then Sonny Snelling on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all my other socials as well.
Brilliant, guys. Make sure you go and give Sonny a follow and a subscribe. Meanwhile, if you haven't already, please do press like on this video. Do subscribe to my channel. I'll be doing another kind of pre-recorded transfer video in the morning, and then hopefully a live stream tomorrow night as well. I'm trying to do live streams most evenings at the moment. Really appreciate your support and all of your comments. And enjoy the rest of your Tuesday nights. And of course, come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs.